Johnny Talk Sports, here to bring you my NFL playoff power ranking. For those of you that are listening for the first time, every year before the playoffs begin, I like to do a power ranking. And I do want to say that just because I have teams ranked higher in this power ranking, it doesn't necessarily mean that I think they're going to win this weekend or lose this weekend, or that's my pick to win the Super Bowl. This power ranking is based off of my personal probability for each team to win the Super Bowl. So who I have at number one, I think has the highest probability. That's who I think the favorite is going into these playoffs. And at the bottom, it's who I think is least likely to win the Super Bowl. So again, these power rankings, it's not going to dictate my picks for this week. It's not going to dictate them for next week or even beyond. It's just who I think is the favorite at this point and who is likely to not win the Super Bowl. So I'm going to start from the bottom. I'm going to go from 14 to 1. At number 14, I have the Eagles. The Eagles, they went on a bit of a hot streak towards the end of the year. They really turned it around the second half of the year. There were a lot of questions on why the Eagles, why they weren't running the football, because it seemed like their strength was running the football. And they didn't run it that much towards the beginning. But then once they started running the football, it started translating to wins. But I know that the Eagles, they made the playoffs for a reason, and any of these 14 teams can go all the way. But I just think with them going up against Tom Brady this week, even though the Bucs, they do have some injuries, and the injuries starting to pile up for Tampa Bay and Antonio Brown with what he did a couple weeks ago. So misfortune starting to pile up for Tampa Bay. Even if the Eagles win this week, then they play Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay next week. And then beyond that, it's unknown at this point. But I just think it's too tall of an order for the Eagles. I know the Eagles, they like being the underdogs. They embrace being the underdogs. But I just can't see them going all the way. Number 13, I have the Steelers. The Steelers got in the playoffs by winning against the Browns and the Ravens the last 2 weeks of the year. And they also did get some help from the Jaguars to knock out the Colts. In what will be Big Ben's final playoff run, he gets one last chance at hoisting a third Lombardi trophy. The Steelers' defense, one of the better defenses in the league, if not maybe a top 3, top 4 defense. But Ben Roethlisberger going on the road to the Chiefs this week, on paper, you'd say that the Chiefs will probably blow them out because they did pretty recently, about 3-4 weeks ago. I just can't really see the Steelers winning the whole thing. Although it could be one of those situations where they're like the Titans from a couple years ago, where the Titans completely relied on Derrick Henry throughout the playoffs. The Steelers, I could see them doing the same thing with Najee Harris. I could imagine Najee Harris maybe getting 30 carries in the game this week against Kansas City. I do think that Najee Harris will be relied on in this matchup and in a potential playoff run moving forward. But I just can't see the Steelers going all the way because I think at the end of it, you still need to have good quarterback play, and Big Ben towards the end of his career, not that quarterback quality that can go all the way. Number 12, I have, this may come as a surprise, but I have the Cardinals. And the reason why I have the Cardinals is simply because of their lack of playoff experience. Cliff Kingsbury coaching in his first playoffs. Kyler Murray, his first start in the playoffs will be this week against the Rams. So I just think simply the inexperience of the Cardinals in the playoffs, I think that's going to have a lot to do with why they don't win the Super Bowl this season. Number 11, another surprise, potentially. But I have the Patriots. And throughout the season, I've seen some people say the Patriots are legitimate Super Bowl contenders. Ever since the Week 4 game against Tampa Bay, I saw many people say that The Patriots, they still got a season left. They can still have a great second half of the year, and then they lose to the Cowboys. And then I think, well, the Patriots are probably down and out. But then they go on, I believe it was a 7-game winning streak, which that's partly how they earned their way in the playoffs. But the Patriots are kind of coming a little bit cold into the playoffs here. They lost 3 out of their last 4. Their only win towards the final stretch of the year was against the Jaguars, which I get they beat the Colts, but you should beat the Jaguars at least 99 times out of 100. And with Mac Jones making his first start in the playoffs this week, I get that maybe some people could think that the Patriots with their defense can carry them, but the thing is, you can only rely on your defense for so long. You can't necessarily rely on a defense to go all the way to the Super Bowl. So that's why I have New England 11, is just because I get their defense is good. It's really like the Steelers in a way. They got a good defense, but can their offense score enough points to keep them in games or win games? That's why I have the Patriots at 11. Number 10, I have the Raiders. The Raiders made their way into the playoffs by winning on Sunday Night Football in Week 18 against the Chargers. And no matter what happens with the Raiders, you've got to give them credit because they faced distraction after distraction throughout the year. And they still managed to get to the playoffs with an interim head coach, which I think that's impressive to do. Because you have John Gruden resigned, but I think that John Gruden was gaslit into resigning because they didn't want to have to pay him $50 million. Because I think if the Raiders didn't make the playoffs and things were really normal, I think John Gruden was gone. So they seized the opportunity to get John Gruden to resign. Henry Ruggs with his incident. They cut Damon Arnett. Nate Hobbs had his incident for Week 18 against the Chargers. So the Raiders, they've overcome a lot of adversity throughout the year. And they're coming in the playoffs hot, but lack of playoff experience for Derek Carr, I think, because this is going to be his first playoff game as he was not with the Raiders. He didn't start the playoff game for the Raiders a few years ago because he was injured. But I just think that the Raiders are an underrated team, but I just think that when you look at the teams that are stacked within the AFC with them, like Kansas City and Buffalo, maybe even Tennessee, because Tennessee feels pretty unpredictable to me. I just think the odds are kind of stacked against the Raiders a little bit. But they've overcome adversity all year, but you never know. So I have the Raiders at 10. Number 9, I have the Bengals. Joe Burrow, his first playoff appearance this weekend. Jamar Chase, first playoff appearance. I think it's going to be another case of the lack of playoff experience here. Because we have 4 quarterbacks making their playoff debuts this weekend. So with that in mind, there was a quote that Joe Burrow did give out at the beginning, not really at the beginning, but at the beginning of the final push of the year, where Joe Burrow said that he's not bothered by NFL crowd noise because of his experience with road games in the SEC. That is helpful. But I just think the lack of playoff experience compared to what we have with Mahomes and Josh Allen, even Ryan Tannehill has some playoff experience. I just think the more experienced teams, I think, have the better chance of making it further in the playoffs. And the Bengals, they had an unbelievable year. I mean, Joe Burrow was a big reason why I won my Money Fantasy Football League. And I'm rooting for the Bengals to go all the way, but I just can't see them doing that. I know they have a win against Kansas City, but the Bengals have never really gotten into a situation like the playoffs, which it'll be a learning experience for Cincinnati no matter how far they go. But 9 for Cincinnati. Number 8, I have the Cowboys. And this may come as a surprise to a lot of people because many think that the Cowboys are one of the favorites heading into the playoffs. But I don't think so. We know the Cowboys' playoff history. They always have a heartbreaking loss at some point. Whether if it's in the first round, the second round, the Cowboys haven't reached the NFC Championship game in, what is it, maybe 25 years, if not longer than that. And the Cowboys defense, there has been some improvements to that defense. And everyone wants to acknowledge Trevon Diggs having 11 interceptions this season, which is the most in the league. But you would expect to have a bunch of interceptions when you're always being targeted, when you're always getting picked on, when you're always getting harassed by your opponent's passing game. You're expecting a lot of interceptions. Trevon Diggs is honestly the Jameis Winston of cornerbacks. Always gets picked on, always gets harassed, but he still comes up with some interceptions. But think of all of the total yardage he's given up in coverage. The Cowboys' defense is what's going to cost them. It's not going to be Dak. It's not going to be Zeke. It's going to be that defense. Because I think once the Cowboys face off against one of the better offenses in the NFC, like, for example, maybe Green Bay, even Tampa Bay, despite them being down at receiver, or even the Rams, the Cowboys, I think, are going to be in trouble. And speaking of the Rams, number 7, I do have the Rams at number 7 in this power ranking. I just think with Matthew Stafford's lack of experience in the playoffs, I know he does have some starts in the playoffs, but he's only made it to the playoffs. He's never won a playoff game. And Stafford is tied with Trevor Lawrence with the most interceptions this season. So I think Matthew Stafford might end up costing the Rams at some point in these playoffs, simply because he's turned the ball over a lot throughout the year. So I think that's going to go back. I think it's going to haunt the Rams at some point. The Rams defense hasn't looked as intimidating as it was last year. Despite it looking more talented, it's not as good, and it's not lighting up the stat sheets like it did last season. But the good news is that Cam Akers is back for the Rams. He saw some action in the Week 18 game against San Francisco. So that's a positive. Darrell Henderson is still in the IR. So at least the Rams are going to have a nice depth at the running back position with Sony Michel and Cam Akers. I'm just wondering how much Cam Akers is going to play in this Rams game against the 49ers this week, and what kind of role is he going to have? How many touches will he get? Number 6, I had the 49ers. And this may be a surprise as well that I had the 49ers higher than I have the Rams, the Cowboys, or even the Patriots, or even the Cardinals. But the 49ers, what they've been doing lately, they're running the football really well. Deebo Samuel's been a big presence in that offense all year long, whether if it's running the football or catching the football. Brandon Ayuk had a slow start to the year, but he's picked it up the further along the season goes. And I think if Jimmy Garoppolo can make some throws, if he can make plays, then I think the 49ers are going to go on a deep run in these playoffs. So San Francisco at 6, mainly because they do have some experience in the playoffs. They just made the Super Bowl 2 seasons ago. And they were about maybe 10 minutes away from winning the Super Bowl just 2 seasons ago. So that's going to come into play for them. I think that's going to be an advantage if they make it deeper, that experience they have, that deep run into the playoffs in the past. Number 5, I had the Titans. And with the Titans having the number 1 seed in the AFC, they're getting Derrick Henry back at some point. But are they getting him back too little too late? Because last week it was said that they were going to start his 3 weeks to return last week. And last week was week 1. This is week 2. And then the divisional round would be week 3. So if they can get past the divisional round, it's possible we can see Derrick Henry in the AFC title game. And that is the last thing that you want to see if you're Kansas City or if you're Buffalo or really anybody in the playoffs, whether if it's the Super Bowl or the conference championship, that's the last thing you want to see is Derrick Henry. So if they can get past that divisional round, I think the Titans would move up in my power ranking, but the fact they don't have him right now, that's affecting my spot where I have the Titans at. But I think the Titans at 5, I think that's really solid. Now we're getting into the top 4 now. Now these 4, in no particular order, are Tampa Bay, Kansas City, who were in the Super Bowl last year, the Packers and the Bills, who were in the conference championships last year as well. So the 4 teams I have left are the teams that were in conference championship weekend last year. And I didn't list those off in the order that I have them in. But at number 4, I have the Bills. Now the Bills they've had a little bit of an up and down season, to say. I mean, they lost week 1 of the Steelers. Then it looked like they were getting back on the right track. Then they lose the Titans on Monday Night Football on a decision that maybe they should have just taken the field goal and played for overtime. But I get that Derrick Henry's on the other side, which I just mentioned a moment ago, that if the Titans can get Derrick Henry back for an AFC title game, that's the last thing you want to see if you're Kansas City or Buffalo, is a healthy Derrick Henry. But if that did happen, though, how healthy would Derrick Henry be? Would he be at 100%? Would he be at 70%? Even Derrick Henry at 70%, I think, is still intimidating for an opposing defense. Even a 50% healthy Derrick Henry would still be intimidating. So Buffalo at number 4. And I have the Bills at 4 because when I look at these 4 remaining teams that are stacked up against each other, they do have the regular season win against Kansas City. They lost Tampa Bay in a game where they fell behind early, but they clawed their way back into that game. And they haven't faced off against the Packers this season. Maybe we could see it in the Super Bowl. Who knows? But the turning point in the year for the Bills, I think it could have been that loss against Jacksonville, because I think they just need to be humbled a bit. And I think with Jacksonville knocking out the Colts from the playoffs, I think that can show that there's any given Sunday. And I've seen some posts on social media on the Bills being frauds throughout the year, which the thing is, I don't think so. I don't think the Bills are frauds or overrated or anything. I just think it's any given Sunday. So I had the Bills at 4. They have the best defense statistically in the NFL. And Josh Allen, one of the best quarterbacks in the league. So I think the Bills' offense is complete. It's just that, can they get to that next step? They made it all the way to the Final Four in the NFL last year, but can they get past Kansas City when it matters? If that is what they're going to be going up against. Number 3, I had the Buccaneers. Now, going into the year, I had the Buccaneers as the favorite to go all the way. Because honestly, why wouldn't you? You had everybody on the starting roster from last year's Super Bowl team coming back. So why would you not have Tampa Bay as your favorite? But the reason why Tampa Bay is 3, I get they have Tom Brady and all of his experience in the playoffs in his 2 decades in the NFL. But injuries are starting to pile up. Chris Godwin, out for the season with a torn ACL. Antonio Brown had his incident, so he's no longer on the Bucs. Leonard Fournette, injured right now. Ronald Jones, injured right now. So their starting running back right now is Keyshawn Vaughn. And that's really concerning when you have these injuries starting to pile up. However, they still have Brady, they still have Gronkowski. Their defense has struggled throughout many points in the year. So there is some concern there. Number 2, I have Kansas City. And Kansas City, it was a struggle to begin the year, which all teams have their flaws at some point in the year. And many people were counting out Kansas City. Many thought Mahomes is overrated. Whether you think he is or not, the Chiefs are still a good team with him. As long as Mahomes is out on the field for the Chiefs, in my mind, you have about an 85 to 90% chance of winning the game. And they have only lost one game since their 3-4 start to the year. So they just kept winning and winning games. And they are one of, if not the hottest team coming into the playoffs right now. I think for as long as Kansas City has their big three of Mahomes, Hill, and Kelsey, they're one of the favorites to go all the way. Their defense has improved a lot in the later portions of the year. In fact, during this stretch, after going 3-4, starting the year off with only 3 wins and losing 4 games, they've only given up more than 24 points 2 times during that stretch. So the defense is really improving. And at number 1, my favorite to hoist the Lombardi Trophy, the Packers. And the Packers are my favorite at this point because they look like the most consistent team in the NFL. If you take out week 1 against the Saints, the Packers, they have played this season near perfect. They lost against the Chiefs in the regular season, but that's because Aaron Rodgers wasn't out there. And I think if Aaron Rodgers plays in that game, I think Green Bay wins. I think without a doubt they probably would have won that game. Then they have the loss to the Vikings on a last-second field goal. And then they lose the Lions in Week 18 where the starters only play one half. So just based off of those things, the Packers, they've played the best football in the NFL so far this season, in my opinion. And that's why I had them as the favorite. But we all know the Packers as the team that goes to the NFC title game and loses. Can they get over that last hump to get back to the Super Bowl? Can they get past the NFC Championship game in what is likely going to be Aaron Rodgers' last year with Green Bay, unless something happens, like he changes his mind? I mean, he described this season for the Packers as the last dance, which makes you think this is Green Bay's last chance to get back to the Super Bowl and hoist another Lombardi Trophy. So those are my playoff power rankings. Comment your playoff power rankings in the comment section. Like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, have a wonderful day.